This is Sister Stage with Freedom Now, here to welcome Brother Johnny Achi, who's with Arab Americans for Syria.
Hello, Sister Stage. Thanks for having me again on the show.
Can you give us an update on what is happening inside of Syria?
Let's talk about what's happening inside Syria, but at the same time, what's going on outside of Syria. As you probably know, about 10 days ago, the new round of Geneva talks started. I don't know if it's number 3 or 4 or 5. We've had so many. While supposedly a ceasefire is taking place inside of Syria. Now, peace talks, or what we like to call them talks, really, because reconciliations and peace are happening inside of Damascus. We don't need Geneva. What's going on in Geneva is a group of outsiders, expatriates, representing really the enemies of Syria, and talks against the Syrian people represented by their government. The Riyadh group, they call it, in reference to the capital of Saudi Arabia, is headed by a terrorist guy, the brother of Zahran Alloush, one of the most infamous terrorists in Damascus, who have reigned Damascus in the last 3 years with thousands of rocket-propelled grenades, caused the life of many Syrians. It's amazing to have his brother represent the opposition in Riyadh or in Geneva. That's how ironic it is. The Syrian government and Syrian people know that these talks are not going anywhere. They know that this is just a break for the opposition to regroup. They've done it for us over 4 or 5 times. Every time there was the Syrian army gaining ground, they call for peace talks. And of course, the Syrian government cannot say no to any attempt to end this crisis. So we go there knowingly that nothing is going to be achieved. What's funny is that the plan B that Obama talked about for a few weeks was finally revealed in the Wall Street Journal last Tuesday on April 12th, one day before the Geneva talks. It revealed that the CIA plans to arm vetted rebels. Now they don't call them anymore moderate rebels. They realized it was, an oxymoron to call these people fighting. Those Islamist jihadist guys call them moderate. So they call them now vetted rebels. But they're saying they're willing to arm them now with really advanced weaponry, anti-aircraft and tanks, had or if plan A fails. Of course, this what it means. It's an unmistakable message being conveyed by Washington to sabotage the ceasefire, telling the rebels, fail the peace talks and receive more weapons. And that's exactly what happened. They walked out saying, we would only stay if President Assad leave. Just the same, message repeated over and over again. They walked out. These talks are done. On the ground, they have received already a lot of weapons. I know on the ground, many people in northern Syria saying the rebels did receive in those 2 weeks a lot of weapons. So it's back to the Syrian army continuing to gain more territories. It's something very important happened also at the same time on last Tuesday, actually 10 days ago. The Syrian parliamentary election took place, and that is something that the West did not want to happen. And the reason is, of course, they want to have void. They want to show that this government is not capable of running. And if you can have a void, that's another pretext for intervention. They've done it in Libya. They've done it in Iraq. Okay, now we can go in. There's no government. We go in before things get worse, and actually, by them going in makes things worse. So the Syrian government insisted on having this parliamentary election. It was mocked, but it was a great success. That election was a vote of confidence by the Syrian people in their government. Over 5,085,000 cast ballots out of about 8 million eligible voters. That's about 58%. Regardless of there was over 4,000 candidates. Everybody voted, and a lot of them actually came in as independent. But the idea is the percentage. That 58% is much higher than the last U.S. presidential election of 48%. So anyone mocking this election, it was a real vote of confidence by the Syrian people. What's significant is actually some of the cities that had seen the most fighting, and they were liberated. They've seen the highest votes. Homs, for example, which was the site of the first 2-3 years in the crisis in Syria, voted over 82%, which tells you that maybe more these people who have seen the worst and they are so grateful to be liberated wanted to vote, to exercise their right, their political right. Another significant thing was over 140,000 refugees returned across the border from Lebanon just for one day to cast their votes. So the result really tells you that, the Syrian people are the ones, and that's what the Syrian government is saying. They're the ones, not Plan B, not the U.S., who will decide who will vote, who will stay in Syria and who will not. Of course, Plan A is for Assad to resign. That's all they want. If they can't get that, then the more weapons to be vetted. Now, I do want to talk about the U.S. roles in Syria. I've been saying it here for many years. We've been coming on the show here, Sister Stage, we talked about the U.S. role in aiding or creating ISIS. Some people think this is, how can this be? The U.S. is carrying a big coalition of war against ISIS. Well, I can assure you that the ever-ending desire for control of Syria and control of the Middle East drives the U.S. and its allies to support these Islamists as their proxies. They've done it in the past. They are still doing it today. This contradictory agendas of pretending to be fighting ISIS while really using ISIS. As you all know, the ISIS and Nusra Front are the main fighting force against the Assad regime. And this is the plan, is to fight Assad, have Assad, leave power for ultimately a bigger, greater price, which is a change in regime in Iran. As long as Syria stays strong, there is no further plans. So, we've proved it over and over again that the US, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, all these supposed to be a coalition against ISIS, are the ones who are aiding and abetting those terrorist groups and, making them stronger. The fighting in northern Syria, it's funny because Washington strategy has become so ironic that the Pentagon and the CIA today are actually fighting each other. Believe it or not. Washington Post broke the story, not me. They're backing different rivals in Syria, different terrorist groups. These terrorist groups have been fighting one another in northern Syria for the last 3-4 weeks. So it's ridiculous that, even within the same department, the US CIA and the US State Department are backing up different groups who are fighting on the ground. So we're going to come to a point here that eventually it's up to the Syrian people, no one else, who will determine the future of Syria. And, again, this last parliamentary election was nothing but that.
Right, and the U.S. taxpayers' dollars are paying for the U.S. Defense Department fighting itself in Syria.
The point of this parliamentary election is to show the world, especially Western countries and Gulf states who have waged this 5-year-long war of aggression against Syria, that Syrians are united. Syrians will not be divided. And in the belief of Syrians, only Syrians will decide the fate of Syria.
We've been speaking with Johnny Achi with Arab Americans for Syria.